So I am very tired today because yesterday was an extremely long day of neuro testing and autism testing. So let's get into it. So today I want to talk about basically the test itself of the neuro testing that I had done, why I had it done, and then in another video I'll go over the results because I don't know the results yet. They would have come back next week, but I actually have a very full week, and so I'm going to be talking with the test taker in 2 weeks, not test taker, the person who administered the test in 2 weeks to get the test results. So stay tuned for the results, but I'm gonna go over the test today. So the reason I got the neuropsych testing done was, one, I'm gonna be applying for disability at some point, and so to have this testing done to assess like where my cognitive ability is hopefully will be helpful. And then two, my neurologist really wanted me to have this testing done because he just also wanted to kind of assess where my abilities are right now because my brain fog is just so bad. And so we can compare this testing to similar testing I had done in high school. So in high school, more than a decade ago, I had testing done that was for basically for testing accommodations. So when I took the ACT and the SAT, I had accommodations for, I think it was double time for breaks as needed. I could have water and snacks in the room. And one of the tests I did, I was in my own room. Like I had my own proctor and I was separate from everyone else. Usually I was with everyone else. I could just go a lot longer if I needed to. And that was incredibly helpful in high school because, you know, my chronic illness started when I was 14. And so all of high school was really rough. At one point I wasn't even thinking I could graduate high school. So then I took those accommodations and I took them into college too. So when I went into college, I met with the accommodations office and basically got every single accommodation except for Braille that they offered because of the testing I had done. I just qualified for all of those accommodations. And so it was incredibly helpful. The testing in high school was really intense. I had to do it over 2 days. I don't think it was covered by insurance. This test, thank God, was covered by my insurance. I'm so incredibly grateful that this test and the autism test was covered by insurance. So the testing itself, this one was 3 hours long, which was a lot shorter than the last testing that I had done, but it was very similar. So I kind of wanted to go over the testing because I wasn't nervous yesterday going into this because I'd had testing done that was similar to this in high school. But if I had not had that testing done and this was my first neuro testing experience, I would have been really nervous. Before yesterday, I did a bunch of research because I just like to know what I'm going into, basically. Sorry, my brain is just kind of burned. My brain is just kind of shot after yesterday because it's a very intense 3 hours. And so I'm incredibly exhausted today. I'm not gonna lie, like I was on the couch before this, and after this, I'm gonna be back on the couch probably for the next few days. It's basically a workout for your brain, and my brain's not doing well. That's why I had the testing done, and so it's fully exhausted. And so I'm not necessarily speaking great in this vlog, but I wanted to capture it before I forget about the experience since my memory is really bad. I had to be there at 9:30, and that's also rough because my brain doesn't start working until like noon. I've never been a morning person, even before my chronic illness started 13 years ago. Mornings are rough for me, and so my brain was already just not having a good time, and it was about a 45-minute drive there, so we had to get up pretty early. The first about hour 15, hour 30 of the test was an interview. Now, this testing was obviously catered to me. It was neuropsych and autism testing combined. They were looking for how my that's an example of how my brain is not functioning, but they wanted to look at my brain function. A lot of neurotesting is looking at, you know, do you have Alzheimer's or dementia? Are they testing for Parkinson's or other neurodegenerative diseases like MS? You know, there's a ton of reasons people get neuropsych testing. So this is just my personal experience with the people that I went with. Most neuropsych testing, it was going to take months, if not into next year. It's July right now. When I was scheduling this, it was like June. They were scheduling into next year because of long COVID has caused so many people to have to get this neuropsych testing done. And also I think some new Alzheimer's drugs came out, and so more people can be tested earlier to see if they qualify to get an Alzheimer's drug sooner. So Most people I called, it was gonna take so long to get in to do this testing. The place that I had actually scheduled with and filled out all of their forms, they were scheduling out for 3 months. And then the results could take 4 to like 16 weeks. And they were just gonna do neuropsych testing. The only place I found, and I called so many places, the only place that did neuropsych and autism testing that I found in my area locally that was covered by insurance was the place that I went with. And I'm so grateful I found them. So yes, I ended up scheduling with them. It was like 2 weeks to get in to see them. And then the results were gonna be in a week, which is crazy. So anyway, back to the beginning of the test. So even before I went in, they sent me some forms to fill out. So I filled some of those forms out, some of just my medical history and stuff. I also had gotten a referral from my neurologist. So he had sent over some of my records and stuff as well. So they had all of that information kind of going into it. Now, the clinical interview was a whole bunch of stuff. Everything from my history, like do I have high cholesterol? Don't know why they needed to know that. And just, you know, my whole health history to how do I sleep? And what are my social interactions like? Those were more like the autism questions. Do I have texture issues? Spoiler alert, yes I do. So lots of like questions spanning a lot of different things, and I had my mom with me during the clinical interview part because they encouraged me to bring someone. She was able to answer a lot of the questions from like my childhood, although we weren't necessarily prepared for a lot of the questions because like my mom was talking about when your kid is doing stuff, you just think it's normal. Like I'm an only child, and so when she was asking about like my social interactions growing up or all these different things, it was like it just seems normal, or just felt normal at that time, especially related to like the autism questions. The whole first part was that clinical interview portion, and then the next hour and a half was testing. So we ended up ending with, there were 3 different kind of forms that I had to fill out. The last one was like 330 questions, and the questions were kind of crazy. So it was like false, slightly true, mostly true, always true, or something. And one of the questions was like my favorite poet was, and then like some poet I've never even heard of before. Another question was like, my favorite hobbies are stamp collecting and archery. And I was like, what are these questions? So I have no idea what that was about. Some of them I think were screening for like narcissism, because there were questions like, I always have brilliant ideas. And I was like, I sometimes have good ideas. I don't always have, like a lot of them are like always or never. And I'm like, I can't say that, like that saying an absolute is crazy. Or I was asking for a lot of clarification because a lot of the questions were just like, not enough context, which I think further made her be like, you might have autism. Anyway, so all of that was super interesting, but that was a very, very long, especially at the very end, my brain was so fried by that point. And a lot of times I would just read a question 20 times until my brain could try to understand what it was saying. And some of them I was like, I honestly don't even know what they're talking about here. I'm just gonna put a random answer. So that was the last part of the test. The middle part of the test was a bunch of different like memory stuff. So the first question was like, draw a clock face. I believe I had done this in high school too, but my God, trying to remember a clock face, I don't know why it was so difficult for me. I wanted to start at 1. That's not right. And then she was like, so do it like 10:15 or something. I have such a problem with people being like 10:15 or like it's 10 after, or like, I don't know, if you don't just say like 10:28. I don't understand what you're saying. And then I think I messed up the short and long hands. This is why I was getting the testing done, because I have mental problems. With the brain fog just being so bad for so long. Yeah, you could tell on the test. You could definitely tell. My favorite part of the test was kind of like a geometric pattern puzzle. I love puzzles. Kind of one of my special interests. And so basically there would be geometric patterns that you would have to like copy with these blocks, and they all had like different sides, and it was so fun copying these patterns. One of the major memory things was she listed a list of probably like 15 words, and then you had to remember as many things as you could from that list. She probably said it back 5 times. Then she said another list, and then you had to remember which was from which list. And then throughout the rest of the test, she would ask, could you tell me as many words you remember from that first list? And then also breaking it down by, tell me the animals you remember, tell me the foods you remember, tell me the modes of transportation you remember. That was so hard. And then also another one was like, basically, what do these birds have in common? So like cat, fish, obviously they're animals. Some of them were really hard, like an anchor and a fence. I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. Another one was like going through pictures of just common objects, and you had to tell her what they were. I got an ostrich wrong. I said it was an emu, my bad. Another kind of question list was just like, what's the year? Who is president? What is today's date? And I was like, I never remember today's date. I always just look at my Fitbit. I'm like, I'm not allowed to cheat, am I? And she was like, so I had to be like, okay, July 4th was on Friday, and then I had to like count back. Yeah. So anyway, lots of memory things. Another one was like copying this really like kind of complicated pattern. Then you had to write it from memory later, like twice. And then the last question was like, which of these designs were in that first pattern? And that was like way later. One of the hardest ones for me was this number thing. So she would list a bunch of numbers in a row and you had to tell them back to her. Then she had you tell them back to her in backwards order. So if she said like 5, 3, 2, then you had to say 2, 3, 5. And then she had a whole list of numbers, and then you had to tell her what they were in order of the numbers. So if it was like 3, 2, 1, you had to say 1, 2, 3. But it was like a long list of that. It was so hard. And then the last thing was at home. So she sent me basically an autism test to do at home, and she sent my mom one with questions about me to do at home. And so I don't know the results of any of those, but that was like 65 questions just about different social stuff. Like, would you rather be alone or with other people? Do other people find you weird? Just a bunch of different questions like that. And so when I get the results back, I'll go more into what led me to want to get tested for autism. So yeah, that was kind of my experience doing neuropsych and autism testing. I am so freaking excited to go over the results in 2 weeks. So stay tuned for the results of that. She kind of her preliminary thought was that my brain fog, kind of my mental capacity, was about the same as in high school with that testing that I had done after I got sick, which makes sense. Although I feel like it's gone down a little bit. Actually, this one, they didn't do math questions. In high school, they literally made me do math questions, which I was prepared for. They didn't really make me do that. And they also did not do like general knowledge questions. So like in high school, they would ask questions, and I vividly remember this one because I couldn't think of it. They were like, who wrote Sherlock Holmes? So basically like an IQ test. My dad's gonna kill me because my dad loves Sherlock Holmes, but I couldn't think of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Of course, now I've never forgotten that because I'm like, I can't. And so anyway, like they didn't do kind of general knowledge questions like that, which was interesting. So it was very like a shorter test. My insurance, I think, only allowed like 3 hours of testing. So anyway, I also am allowed to send her additional thoughts. One of her questions was like, is there anything else you think I should know kind of about the autism stuff? And I went through kind of the texture stuff with her, like a meltdown I have with like automatic stuff. Like I went in a car wash once and just had an absolute meltdown, just a bunch of different stuff, but I wasn't really prepared. Usually I prepare. I wasn't prepared for that question. So she was like, you can email me if you think of anything else. I have so many other thoughts. So I am preparing an email to send her today of like additional things that might be helpful as she's kind of going over the results. So she, yeah, takes time to kind of put everything together, you know, all the test results, and then goes over that with us. So very excited to get the results of that. But I wanted to talk about this test because I know that it helps people sometimes to be like, okay, before I go into this test, I kind of know just like what to expect, because it just helps me at least mentally prepare. Like that's a huge important thing that I do before a lot of my health tests. So that was my experience with neuropsych and autism testing, and I'll have the results in a couple weeks. All right, talk to y'all soon, my friends. Bye.